The alien nursery was quiet in the early hours. Rows of glowing cribs stretched across the chamber, each holding a small fragile infant wrapped in soft fabric that shimmered like starlight. Alien attendants moved gently between the rows, checking on the young with slow, graceful hands. The air smelled sweet from the flowers placed near the cribs. Everything seemed peaceful. A single human stood near the entrance. His name was Daniel. He had been assigned as a guard, standing watch while the attendants did their work. Most of the time he only leaned against the wall, silent and unnoticed. To the attendants he was strange, tall, and out of place, but the infants often stirred when he walked past, their tiny eyes glowing faintly as if curious about the foreign figure. Then it happened. A faint hiss broke the calm. At first, no one noticed. It was small, almost like the sound of a cracked pipe. Daniel frowned and turned his head. The attendants looked at one another nervously. Within seconds, the hiss grew louder. A strange, sharp smell spread across the nursery. It burned the throat. The alarms triggered. Red lights flashed along the walls. A loud voice announced danger in the alien language. The attendants panicked. They understood at once poison gas had leaked into the chamber. The gas was deadly to their kind, their lungs too delicate to resist even a few breaths. Chaos erupted. The attendants rushed toward the exit, but they froze at the door. The cribs, dozens of them, were still inside. The infants were helpless, too small to crawl, too weak to resist the spreading gas. Leaving them meant death, but going back meant the attendants themselves would die. Daniel's heart raced. He looked around, saw the terrified attendants hesitate, their hands trembling. No one moved toward the infants. He stepped forward. "We can't leave them," he shouted. Though his words were half lost in the alarm's blaring echo, the attendants shook their heads, fear filling their wide alien eyes. The gas thickened. The infants began to cough and cry, a weak sound like wind through broken glass. Daniel clenched his jaw. He pulled down the visor of his helmet, sealed the mask, and without another thought, ran into the chamber. The attendants gasped. Some screamed for him to stop, but his figure disappeared into the mist. His boots pounded the floor. He passed row after row of glowing cribs. The sight of the infants struggling to breathe struck him like knives. Their tiny hands reached upward, as if begging for air. Daniel grabbed the nearest crib, lifting the fragile infant into his arms. He tucked the small body against his chest and sprinted toward the exit. The gas stung even through the filters of his helmet. His lungs burned, but he did not stop. He passed the child into the hands of a trembling attendant waiting by the door. Then he turned back. His instincts screamed to run, to escape the poison. But he could still hear the faint cries echoing inside. Each cry was a call for help, and he could not ignore them. He went back in. The red lights flashed against the haze, making the chamber look like a battlefield. His vision blurred. Sweat trickled down his neck. He reached another crib and carried 2 infants at once, their bodies light as feathers but their gasps heavy with fear. Again, he rushed to the exit, his chest aching. The attendants stood frozen, none able to enter. They watched the human dive in again and again. Each trip cost him strength. His breath came harder, the filters in his helmet beginning to fail. Daniel's mind screamed at him to stop, but his heart refused. He had seen human children before, fragile and innocent, and these alien young were no different. They deserved a chance to live. The toxic air grew thicker, swirling like a living shadow. The alarms now warned of full contamination. A voice declared the chamber unsafe, urging evacuation. Still, Daniel pressed on. His boots slipped. His vision swam. But he pushed himself to the last row of cribs. At the farthest corner, a small infant lay still, barely moving. The gas clouded thick around the crib. Daniel staggered forward, his knees buckled, his hand gripped the side of the crib as darkness pressed at the edge of his mind. With the last of his strength, he lifted the child, holding it close. The exit seemed impossibly far. Every step was a battle. His legs heavy, lungs screaming. The child gave a weak whimper. and that sound forced him onward. He stumbled, nearly falling, but he forced himself upright, step after step toward the flashing lights at the door. He emerged from the gas cloud, collapsing into the arms of the attendants, the infant safe in his hold. The attendants cried out. Rushing to take the child, Daniel fell to one knee, his mask cracked, the poison beginning to seep through. The attendants pulled him away from the door. Their voices trembled with disbelief. None of their kind could have survived even one trip into the poison, but this human had gone in again and again. He was still alive, barely. The nursery echoed with the cries of saved infants, their voices fragile but filled with life. Daniel's vision blurred, his body shaking. He looked at the attendants, then back toward the nursery still filled with haze. He knew his fight was only beginning. And in that moment, as the alarms continued to wail, the queen herself was on her way. Daniel's chest heaved as he stumbled out of the gas-filled nursery. The attendants rushed forward, taking the infants from his arms. Their eyes were wide with terror and awe. None of them had ever seen anyone step into toxic air and come back alive. Daniel could feel his lungs burn, even through the helmet. His body begged him to stop, but deep inside, he knew he could not leave the others behind. The alarms screamed louder, warning of rising contamination. The nursery was filling faster. The leak was no small crack. It was a full rupture in the old pipes that ran beneath the floor. Poison flowed like a river, rolling into every corner of the chamber. The infants still trapped inside had only minutes before the air stole their final breath. Daniel turned back toward the entrance. The attendants tried to stop him, one pulling at his arm. "You will die if you go in again," she cried, her delicate skin already blistering from the thin traces of gas drifting near the door. Daniel's voice was hoarse but firm. "If I don't go, they will die." He pulled free and charged inside once more. The mist closed around him like a living beast. His visor fogged, his breathing shallow. He forced himself to focus. His boots struck the floor in heavy thuds, guiding him back to the glowing rows of cribs. The cries of infants cut through the alarms like broken music. Weak but still alive, he lifted two more at once, tucking them under his arms. Their tiny bodies shook with fear. One reached up, clutching at his armor. The touch gave him strength. He sprinted toward the exit, his vision flashing red as the filters in his helmet warned of failure. The attendants gasped as he emerged again, collapsing to one knee. They reached for the infants, pulling them to safety. Daniel shook his head, his eyes blazing. "More." Inside, his words came out in broken gasps, but he stood again, his legs trembling. His determination overpowered the pain. Back inside, the gas was thicker than before. The glowing lights of the cribs were barely visible, like stars swallowed by a storm. Daniel's stomach twisted. He had to hold his breath for short moments to keep moving. He pushed himself deeper, his hands searching. Another row. 5 more infants, each one gasping, their lungs too fragile to survive the poison. He lifted as many as he could, carrying 3 at once though his muscles screamed, his vision blurred. His arms heavy, sweat poured down his back. His strength was fading. He stumbled, nearly falling over. His knee struck the floor, pain shooting through his leg. The infants whimpered, one almost slipping from his hold. Daniel forced his arms tighter around them. He dragged himself forward step by step. At the door, the attendants rushed again. Some cried openly, watching the human risk himself again and again. They begged him to stop, their voices cracked with fear. "No more, you will not survive." But Daniel pushed past them, his chest rising and falling like a war drum. "They need me," was all he said, and he turned back. By now the gas reached the ceiling, swirling in thick green clouds. The alarms changed tone, announcing structural danger. If the pipes fully ruptured, the nursery could collapse. The entire chamber could become a tomb. Daniel's helmet cracked at the edge, a faint hiss leaking into the mask. His eyes stung, his throat seared. He ignored it, Crawling now instead of running, his hands found another crib, the faint glow guiding him. He saw 2 infants lying side by side, unmoving. His heart clenched. He bent low, checking their tiny chests' faint movement. They were alive but seconds from suffocating. He tore off his cracked visor and pressed it gently over the smaller one. His own lungs screamed as raw poison touched his throat. He coughed violently, but forced himself to lift them both. His legs barely responded. He staggered, his arms like stone. The exit was far, each step blurred into the next. Darkness nipped at the edges of his mind. His body begged to collapse. But a thought cut through the haze. Not while they breathe. He pushed forward, stumbling into the light of the doorway, collapsing with the infants safe in his arms. The attendants caught him before he struck the floor, their hands trembling. Their voices broke with disbelief. No one had ever seen courage like this. He had gone inside more times than they could count. His body was breaking, yet his eyes still turned toward the nursery. One attendant whispered, her voice shaking, "He is not one of us, yet he protects our children like his own." Another wept, pressing her forehead against the infant she cradled. The chamber still roared with alarms. The poison still spread. Dozens more infants remained trapped. Daniel coughed, blood on his lips. His chest burned like fire, yet he forced himself to his knees, his voice raw but steady. "I'm not finished." He pulled himself upright, leaning against the doorframe. His shadow stretched long against the red glow. Behind him the mist thickened, waiting. The attendants stared at him in silence, fear and awe battling in their hearts. And Daniel, though shaking and half-broken, took one more step into the toxic storm, knowing the race against death had only just begun. The palace corridors shook with the alarms. Word of the toxic leak had already reached the highest chambers. The queen of the alien empire, mother to millions, stepped forward from her throne with fire in her eyes. Her attendants and guards begged her to remain safe, but her heart was bound to the nursery. No danger could hold her back when the lives of her young were threatened. She walked with long strides, her royal cloak brushing the polished floors. Her guards followed, armored and armed yet fearful of what awaited. The queen's face was calm, but her eyes glowed like burning suns. She had ruled through war and famine, but nothing struck her soul like the cry of her children. The heavy doors to the nursery opened, and the queen entered the smoke-filled hall. Instantly, the stench of poison bit at her throat. She covered her mouth, her lungs resisting even the faintest trace. The attendants fell to their knees in respect, their voices trembling. "Your Majesty, it is not safe. Please, step back." But the queen lifted her hand, silencing them. Her gaze locked on the chaos inside. Through the rolling mist she saw him, Daniel, the human. His tall frame swayed as he carried yet another pair of infants toward the exit. His armor was scratched, his helmet cracked, his skin pale with strain. The queen froze in place, disbelief spreading across her noble features. Her people could not step into that poison for even a heartbeat. Yet here was this outsider, this strange being from a distant world, throwing himself again and again into the deadly fog. She saw him collapse to his knees at the threshold, attendants rushing to pull the infants free. Still, his trembling hands pointed back inside, his voice raw. "More." Still inside, the queen's heart clenched. Her instincts demanded she act. She turned to her elite guards. "Enter, help him, bring out the children." But the guards lowered their eyes, their armor strong, but their bodies too weak against the poison. "Majesty, we will not last a moment inside. The air itself kills us," one admitted in shame. For a heartbeat, silence ruled. The queen's mind raced. Should she order them to sacrifice themselves in vain, or stand helpless as the human alone carried the weight of salvation? Her eyes returned to Daniel, watching him rise once more. His steps faltered, but his will remained unbroken. His figure vanished into the mist yet again. The queen's chest tightened. She had seen warriors in battle, soldiers who swore loyalty to her crown, Yet this human was no subject of her throne. He owed her nothing, and still he fought harder than any of her own people. The realization struck her heart like thunder. This was not duty. It was something deeper. The attendants whispered in awe, "Why does he do this, Majesty? He is not of us." The queen did not answer at first. Her eyes followed the red glow. Within the mist, she thought of the stories told of humans reckless, stubborn, but fiercely protective. Perhaps those tales were true. Perhaps this man's heart could not allow the innocent to perish, no matter their shape or skin. Minutes stretched like hours, then Daniel stumbled back into view, his arms shaking as he carried the last infant from another row. His lips were blue, his coughs violent, blood smeared inside his visor. The attendants rushed forward, pulling the infant to safety, but the queen herself moved. Her royal hand reached out, steadying him, her voice low yet strong. "Enough, human. You have done more than any could ask." But Daniel shook his head, his eyes, though half closed, still burned with fire. "Not finished," he gasped. He pulled free from her touch, staggering toward the nursery door once more. The queen's heart pounded. She had never seen such defiance, such refusal to surrender. A strange heat filled her chest, respect, admiration, and something like sorrow. She whispered to her guards, "If I had 10 of him, I would never fear war again." Inside the mist, Daniel's figure disappeared once more. The queen clenched her hands. Her attendants begged her to leave, to save herself from the spreading poison. But she would not go. She stood rooted to the spot, her eyes locked on the deadly doorway. Then a sudden rumble shook the floor. The pipes beneath groaned, metal screeched. The structure itself trembled. As if ready to collapse, the attendants screamed in terror. Some backed away, but the queen did not move. Her gaze stayed fixed. She whispered under her breath, "Hold on, human, hold on." Through the choking fog, Daniel stumbled into view. Again, carrying yet another child, his body leaned forward, each step a war against death. The queen rushed to him herself. Ignoring her attendants' cries, she took the infant from his arms with surprising gentleness, pressing the child close to her chest. Her eyes met his, and for the first time in centuries of rule, she bowed her head slightly. "You honor me, and you honor us all," she whispered. Daniel swayed, his breath ragged, his knees buckled. Still, his gaze turned back toward the mist. The queen stepped closer, her voice firm. "No more. If you fall, none will survive. Let me bear witness to what you have done. Let me carry your story." But the human's lips twisted into a weak, stubborn smile. "As long as one breath remains," he rasped. Then, without waiting, he turned back toward the toxic storm. The queen's eyes widened, her heart thundered in her chest. In that moment she understood. She was not just witnessing an act of courage. She was watching the spark of something greater, a force her people had never known. And as the alarms wailed and the chamber shook, the queen whispered a promise to herself. "If he survives this day, his name will never be forgotten." The nursery groaned under the weight of poison and broken metal. The air inside was no longer just a haze. It had become a storm of thick clouds swirling against the walls. Sparks jumped from the ceiling as pipes cracked and vented. The alarms now screamed in one steady tone, warning of total collapse. Daniel's body shook with exhaustion. His armor was dented, his helmet cracked wide. Every breath was a knife in his chest, but he refused to stop. He had pulled dozens of alien infants to safety, yet he knew in his heart some still remained inside. Their faint cries had not left his ears. They called to him like distant bells, and he could not walk away. The queen herself stood near the entrance, holding one of the rescued infants in her arms. Her royal presence filled the hall, but even she could not stop what was happening. Her people could only watch in horror as the human, broken yet unyielding, prepared himself for one final journey into the storm. Daniel pressed his forehead against the doorframe for a moment, his breath ragged, his vision dim. His heart hammered like a war drum. He whispered under his breath, "One more time. Then, with trembling legs, he pushed himself into the chamber once again. The poison wrapped around him instantly. His lungs begged for air. His eyes burned. He stumbled forward, one hand against the wall. The red glow of the emergency lights flickered like fading stars, guiding him toward the farthest corner. There he found them, 3 small cribs untouched. Their glow dimming, inside, the infants lay nearly motionless, their tiny chests barely rising. Daniel's heart clenched. He staggered closer, dropping to his knees. His hands shook as he lifted the smallest one first, cradling the fragile body. Against his chest, his helmet hissed. The crack widened. The filters were gone. The poison poured straight into his lungs. He coughed violently, blood flecking his lips. Still, he pushed the visor onto the child, sealing it so the infant could breathe the last clean air left. His vision spun. The world tilted. His legs refused to rise. He forced himself upright, clutching the remaining infants with both arms. His body screamed in pain. His chest felt like it was filled with fire, but he staggered forward step by step. Behind him, the chamber roared. A deep rumble shook the floor. The pipes burst, spewing thick waves of gas. The ceiling groaned, chunks of metal falling like rain. The structure was moments away from collapse. The Queen cried out at the entrance. Her voice carried across the hall. "Come back, human, now!" Her guards held her back as the poisonous air surged outward, but her eyes never left the shadow of Daniel stumbling in the mist. He could barely see, barely hear. Each heartbeat was slower, heavier. His body wanted to collapse, but the weight in his arms reminded him why he could not. He whispered to the infants, his voice shaking. "Just a little longer, stay with me." His knees buckled once, twice. His face struck the floor, but he pushed himself up, crawling now instead of walking. The door seemed impossibly far, a faint square of light in the fog, but he dragged himself forward inch by inch. His hands bled as they scraped across the floor, but he would not let go of the children. At the threshold, the attendants screamed in shock. They saw his broken figure crawl from the mist. The Queen stepped forward despite her guards. She reached out, taking one of the infants from his arms. Daniel's head fell forward, his lips stained red. His chest rattled as if each breath was his last still. He lifted the final child with both hands, holding it out with trembling arms, his voice no more than a whisper. "Safe. Now." Then his body collapsed completely, falling across the floor like a stone. The attendants rushed to gather the infants. Their small lungs gasped for air but slowly steadied as they were carried into clean chambers. The Queen knelt beside Daniel, her royal robes sinking into the dust and gas. Her eyes burned with tears that no one had ever seen from her before. She placed her hand gently against his chest, feeling the faintest rise and fall. His heart still fought, fragile but unbroken. "You gave your breath for theirs," she whispered. Her voice shook with reverence. Her guards looked on in silence, none daring to speak. The chamber behind them shuddered, then collapsed with a deafening roar. Metal and stone caved inward, sealing the nursery forever. But the last of the infants were safe, carried out of death's reach. The Queen's voice carried through the hall, strong and unshakable. "Remember this day. Remember what he has done, for no crown, for no throne, but for life itself." The attendants bowed their heads, their tears mixing with the smoke. Daniel lay motionless, his body weak, his breathing faint but alive. The Queen's hand never left his chest, her heart heavy with a vow. This human had given more than anyone could have demanded. He had saved the future of her people, and for that, she swore his name would be written into the eternal memory of the stars. **. The hall outside the ruined nursery was filled with silence, broken only by the faint cries of the saved infants. The attendants moved quickly, wrapping the little ones in blankets, checking their breathing. Their hands trembled, their voices low. None could believe the impossible had happened. The young were alive. At the center of it all lay Daniel, his body limp against the cold floor. His armor was scorched, his face pale. Every breath he took was shallow and broken. The poison had carved deep into his lungs. Each inhale rattled, each exhale weaker than the last. To the attendants, it looked like the final moments of a fading flame. The queen remained kneeling beside him, her royal hands pressed against his chest. Her guards shifted uneasily, none daring to touch her. They had never seen their ruler lower herself so close to another being, much less a human outsider. But the queen's eyes did not leave his face. Her voice was soft yet unshakable. "He will not die here, not after this." She ordered her attendants to bring the healers. The best of her people rushed in with glowing tools and crystal vials. They placed Daniel on a stretcher of light, lifting him carefully, his head rolled weakly to one side, his lips whispering something none could understand. His body shivered as if trapped between fire and ice. They carried him through the palace corridors to the healing chamber, a vast room filled with humming machines and pools of bioluminescent liquid. The healers worked in silence, their movements fast but precise. They stripped away his broken armor, exposing skin burned and scarred by the poison. His chest rose and fell like a man drowning in air. One healer leaned close to the queen. "Majesty, his body was not made for such toxins. Our medicine may not hold him. His organs are failing." The queen's gaze hardened. She spoke in a tone that silenced the room. "Then give him more than medicine. Give him our will." The healers obeyed. They lowered Daniel into a pool of glowing liquid. The chamber lights pulsed as ancient machines stirred to life. Strange symbols floated in the air, swirling around his body. The liquid shimmered as it entered his wounds, trying to repair what the gas had destroyed. Daniel's mind drifted in darkness. He was aware of pain but also of something else, a strange warmth pulling him back. He saw flashes of faces, human and alien. He saw the tiny hands of the infants he had carried. He heard their weak cries. Then he felt another presence, deeper and stronger, the queen's voice, echoing through his haze. "Live, human, live for what you have done." Outside the healing pool, the attendants whispered. Some wept, some bowed their heads. They could not understand why this outsider fought for their children. They had always believed humans were reckless wanderers, selfish and strange. Yet this one had given everything without asking for reward. Their hearts ached with both shame and gratitude. Hours passed. Daniel's body convulsed, his lungs rejecting the poison. His breath stopped once, twice. Each time the healers forced it back with beams of light pressed against his chest. His skin glowed faintly, his veins carrying both alien medicine and human resilience. The queen never left his side. She stood tall, her cloak brushing the floor. Her eyes never wavered. She had seen many warriors fall, but none had fought like this one. None had clung to life not for glory, not for self, but for others. As dawn broke, the chamber lights dimmed. The healers stepped back, their faces pale with exhaustion. "Majesty," one whispered. "He clings still. He may yet live. But it is not certain. The fight will be his alone now." The queen looked down at the human lying in the pool of light, his chest rising faintly, his face pale but steady. She placed her hand gently on the surface of the liquid, near his heart, her voice low but firm. "Then let him fight, but he will not fight alone, for my people owe him everything, and I will not let him be forgotten." Daniel's body twitched. His lips parted, a faint breath escaped. His eyes did not open, but somewhere in the darkness of his mind he heard her words, and he held them close like a shield. In the outer halls, the saved infants slept peacefully, unaware of the storm that had nearly taken them. To their people, they were more than just children. Now they were proof of the human sacrifice. The attendants spoke in whispers of the day's events, of the human who walked into death again and again. Some began to call him by a new name, the breath giver, for he had given his breath so that the young could take theirs. Night fell again. The queen remained in the chamber, standing vigil, her eyes heavy but unyielding. She spoke quietly, as if to herself, but also to the unconscious human. Between life and death you walk, Daniel, but know this, if you return, your name will never die. It will live in every child you saved, in every story we tell, and in every star we look upon. And though he lay silent, his heart answered with one more beat, asterisk. The healing chamber glowed in soft blue light. Strange machines hummed gently, their energy wrapped around Daniel like a cocoon. His body floated weakly in the pool of liquid medicine. His chest rose and fell in painful rhythm, each breath a battle between life and death. The queen had not moved since the night before. She remained standing near the pool, her royal cloak dragging across the floor. Her attendants whispered in awe at her devotion, but she silenced them with a single glance. She knew this human had carried her people's future on his shoulders. For that, she would not leave him, at last. As the first rays of morning touched the crystal windows, Daniel stirred. His eyes flickered open. He gasped, choking on the weight of air. His body ached with fire, but he was alive. He blinked, confused. The last memory in his mind was the gas, the children, the queen's voice calling out to him. "Rest, human," the queen said softly, her voice calm but filled with power. Daniel turned his head slowly, seeing her standing there, holding herself, tall yet with eyes that carried warmth. He coughed weakly, his voice breaking. "The children, are they safe?" The queen's lips curved into something rare, a faint smile. "They are safe because of you. Every infant breathes still, and they will grow. Your sacrifice saved them all." Daniel closed his eyes, relief washing over him. "Good. Then it was worth it," he whispered. Her attendants gasped, for no one had ever spoken so plainly in front of the queen, but she did not rebuke him. Instead, she lowered herself, kneeling at the edge of the pool. Her hand touched the surface of the glowing liquid near his chest. "You are more than worth it. You have given us a gift no crown could buy. You have given us tomorrow." Later that day, the queen summoned her court, the great hall filled with nobles, guards, attendants, and elders. They gathered to hear her words. Whispers filled the chamber. Stories of the humans' bravery had already spread through the palace. Some doubted, some were in awe, but all waited for the queen's judgment. Daniel was brought in slowly, still weak, his steps unsteady. 2 attendants guided him forward. His body scarred but upright, his eyes burned with quiet strength. The hall fell silent at his arrival. Thousands of alien eyes fixed on the strange figure who had dared what none of them could. The queen rose from her throne, her presence silencing even the echoes. She held in her hands a crystal glowing with silver fire. It pulsed softly, a sacred relic carried only by her family. The court gasped, for they recognized it instantly. The legacy crystal, it was never given to outsiders. It was a bond of memory and honor, reserved for the blood of the royal line. She stepped down from the throne, her cloak flowing behind her. The guards bowed low as she approached Daniel. The hall held its breath. "This human," she declared, her voice resonating through the vast chamber, "has saved the nursery. He has given his breath so that our children may breathe. He has faced death without fear, not for reward, not for duty, but for life itself." Daniel lowered his head, uncomfortable beneath the weight of their eyes. He murmured, "I only did what was right." The queen's gaze sharpened. "No, you did what was beyond right. You gave more than anyone could ask. For that, you shall receive more than any have ever been given." She lifted the glowing crystal high. The light shimmered across the chamber, painting the walls in silver fire. Then she placed it gently into Daniel's scarred hands. The crystal pulsed against his skin, binding itself to him. The court gasped as the glow wrapped around his body, weaving into his very breath. "This is the legacy of my people," the queen said, her voice strong. "It carries memory, it carries honor, it carries eternity. From this day, your name will live among us, carved into our history, sung in our stories, and remembered in every cradle song. You are no longer outsider. You are part of our legacy." Daniel stared at the crystal, his throat tight. He could not find words. His hands shook as the light spread, wrapping him like a second skin. He looked up at the Queen, his voice faint. "I don't deserve this." But the Queen placed her hand firmly on his shoulder, her eyes glowing with fierce respect. "You do, because you gave what no crown could command. You gave your life for our future. That is what makes a legacy." The hall erupted in a sound like thunder. The nobles struck the floor with their staffs. The attendants raised their voices in chant. The word spread like fire through the city. Legacy. Legacy, legacy. Daniel stood trembling, the crystal's light still pulsing in his chest. He felt strength returning slowly, but more than that, he felt something deeper: belonging. For the first time since he had come to this strange world, he was not just a guard, not just a human outsider. He was part of something greater. The Queen raised her hand, silencing the hall. Her eyes swept across her people. "Remember his name, Daniel. He is the breath giver, the guardian of the nursery, the one whose courage will echo through our bloodline forever. As long as we breathe, his story will live." And with that, the gift of legacy was sealed. The palace never forgot that day. The cries of the infants turned into songs of life, and the name Daniel carried across every hall and every street. The Queen's proclamation spread beyond the capital, reaching every corner of the empire. A human who had no crown, no title, no duty, had been given their greatest honor. His story began to weave itself into the hearts of the people. Children grew with the tale whispered beside their beds. Mothers sang his name as they cradled their young. Elders repeated his deeds in the market squares. The people who had once looked at humans as strange outsiders now looked with awe. Some even touched their own throats, remembering how this one man had given his breath so that their children could have theirs. Daniel himself remained quiet. He never sought fame, never demanded reward. He spent his days healing slowly, his lungs still scarred, his body weakened. But when he walked through the streets, the people bowed low. Some reached to touch his hand. Others pressed their children forward. "This is the one who saved you," they told their little ones. The children's wide eyes followed him as if he were more than flesh, as if he were hope itself. The Queen often summoned him to her side, not as a subject but as a companion. She asked him about Earth, about humans, about what drove them to protect those who were not their own. Daniel always gave the same answer: simple but unshakable, because life is precious, no matter whose it is. His words spread through the empire like seeds, changing how many thought of the humans. Years passed. The infants who had once gasped for air grew strong. They played in the palace gardens, their laughter echoing against the walls. They were called the breath-touched generation, for their lives had begun with his sacrifice. Whenever they saw Daniel, they ran to him, tugging at his arms, climbing into his lap, treating him as family. He smiled softly, his eyes glowing with quiet pride. One child, the smallest of them all, grew into a leader. She carried herself with wisdom far beyond her years, for she had been the one he had given his cracked visor to, the one he had shielded with his last breath of clean air. She never forgot. She would stand before him, her head bowed in deep respect, calling him Father of our survival. The Queen kept her promise. His name was etched into the archives of her people. His story was recorded in crystal memory. It would not fade, not even in 1,000 years. When the people looked to the stars, they remembered the human who had walked into death and returned with life. Even other worlds began to hear. Traders and travelers carried the tale of Daniel. Some laughed at first, thinking it only myth. But when they entered the empire and saw the breath-touched generation with their bright eyes, when they heard the Queen herself speak his name with reverence, they knew the story was truth. For humans, too, it became a symbol. News spread back to Earth of what one man had done. It bridged a gap between species, building trust where none had been before. In meetings and councils, whenever suspicion rose, the Queen's people would say, "Remember the breath giver," and silence would fall. Daniel lived humbly, never demanding anything for himself, But the legacy crystal glowed within him, keeping his story alive. Sometimes he would sit alone, staring at the stars, wondering why fate had chosen him for such a path. He never called himself a hero. But when he closed his eyes, he heard the faint cries of the infants turning into laughter, and he knew it was enough. On the anniversary of the rescue, the Queen held a great gathering. The halls were filled with banners of silver and blue. The breath-touched children, now walking and speaking, stood before Daniel. Their voices joined in a song written in his honor. The Queen herself rose, her voice strong. This man is proof that courage does not belong to one people alone. He is proof that humanity carries a fire that burns for all life. Daniel bowed his head, humbled. His body was still marked with scars, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. He looked at the children, at the Queen, at the people chanting his name, and for the first time he truly understood what he had been given. He had not only saved lives, he had built a bridge between worlds. The celebration lasted through the night, yet when it ended, Daniel slipped away quietly. Walking into the gardens where the stars shone above, one of the children followed. The same girl who had once nearly died in the poison. She tugged his hand, her voice small but clear. "You gave me your breath that day. Now I live because of you." Daniel knelt beside her, his tired eyes soft. "No, little one," he said gently. "You live because you fought to take that breath. I only helped, the rest was you." She hugged him tightly, her small arms around his scarred chest. "Then we lived together," she whispered. And in that moment, Daniel felt something greater than any crystal, greater than any title. He felt family. He felt belonging. He felt that his place was not just among humans or aliens, but among all who breathed. The Queen's words proved true. His name did not fade. It lived in stories, in songs, in the stars themselves. He had become more than a man. He had become a symbol, a hero beyond species. Asterisk.